Welcome to the Moselle to Mozart bike tour, part 4. We start this segment at this Gasthof on the river Danube. I woke up early, so I went for a walk, saw the mist lifting over the Danube, and these swans. It's a very idyllic scene, and I'm looking forward to a wonderful day's riding. Now, the swans are being very graceful and swan-like, but it looks like there might be a dog around. Told you. So the first 12 miles a day are the most scenic of an extremely scenic route. I think we've seen enough of Kathy's back, so I'm going to ride around. So that first 12 miles was truly a fabulous way to start the day. So as you can see from the map here, it's about 63 miles, about 1,000 feet of climbing, with a tiny little climb right at the end there. So here we are rolling into the first brew stop of the day. We've had really good weather so far on this vacation. It's been cool, overcast. The only hot day was the rest day, so that was fine. But now it's starting to warm up. It's in the mid-80s today. In fact, at the end of today's ride, it touched 90 Fahrenheit. But the interesting thing is, if you eat enough ice cream, that's not a big deal. Alright, now I've got to figure this out. Yep. After the brew stop, we're away from the Danube for a while and riding through these cornfields. And now we're back on the other side of the Danube. I am loving today. I'm going to play some music that expresses how I feel right now. So today we started seeing large groups of cyclists. No Pinarellos, no Colnagos, no high-end bikes at all. Very little Lycra. Just regular people riding regular bikes. It was quite nice. I felt I fit right in. Lunch today was pizza. The guys waited until we'd all arrived, and then they brought enormous piles of pizza. It was wonderful. You could eat as much as you want, any kind of pizza practically, even stuff I wouldn't touch, with a barge pole.
I don't know how that guy does.
Somebody ate it though, I'm sure. I vaguely recall octopus, but that can't be right. 30 minutes later, and I am completely filled with pizza. I may be riding a little more slowly for a while, like a week. I'm going to speed the video up a little bit to compensate for my slowness. No, that's just making me dizzy. So here we are back on the Danube. Now take a look at this blue sign coming up. It looks like there's something electrical coming up in 500 meters. But my attention span was so poor, there was so much to look at, that by the time I got 500 meters up the road, I'd completely forgotten what it was I was looking for. But this time I have a clear line of sight and I can see electrical cables going over the trail. So I guess every time there's cables going over the trail, they warn you 500 meters ahead. I'm not really sure why. Okay. Maybe they don't want you riding over them if they fall down for some reason. Do you remember I mentioned there was a tiny bit of a climb right at the end of the ride today? Well, here it is. So we're staying in two separate hotels today, right across the road from each other. Now we're scheduled to have a group meal this evening, but there appears to be some kind of confusion and Harry had to use all of his charm to pull this off.
I know, because they open the whole day, and everybody has not a lot of people for working anymore. And therefore I told her the last time she should...
Good job, Harry. I'm proud of you. We ate like kings. Well, technically, like a group of hungry cyclists. Day 13 is 66 miles with 1,100 feet of climbing. Pretty flat. Looks like somebody misplaced the whiteboard, so they used this instead. Today was an interesting day. There was supposed to be a boat detour around a landslide, but the boat was so backed up that we backtracked to a bridge, crossed over to the other side of the Danube and rode on the wrong side of the Danube. But what the heck, it all worked out. Before we start riding, here's a quick video on how German windows work. Put the latch horizontal and you can open the window along its long edge. Put the latch all the way up and you can open the top of the window. Very clever. This place looks nice. Can I tempt you?
Yeah. Ice cream.
Now I mentioned that it got hot the last few days, so we did a few impromptu ice cream breaks.
You can tempt us. We really had problems yesterday.
Hallo, Grüße. Ah, der Stau. Ein Hefeweizen.
Yeah. So here we are arriving at the first brew stop of the day, which is tucked under a bridge, and there was a lot of competition for finding shade. We took off again pretty quickly because it was unpleasant sitting directly in the sun. With full water bottles and a little bit of trail mix, we headed off towards lunch. And after lunch, we got to the ferry that was supposed to take us around this rock fall. It sounded like a great idea, and we were looking forward to a little boat ride, but apparently the ferry only holds about 6 cyclists and their bicycles, and the round trip from the ferry terminal to the far side of the rock fall and back was about 30 minutes. Counting all the people and bicycles in front of us, there were 22, including us. So we figured that was going to be an hour and a half, perhaps 2 hours before we got to the far side of the rock fall. So after standing there for about 10 minutes, we decided it would be quicker and more enjoyable to turn around, ride back to the bridge about 5 miles behind us, cross the bridge, and then ride on the other side of the Danube. Our hotel was on that side of the Danube anyway, so that would work out pretty well.
Well, if you want ice cream, we have to get it in milk.
So we texted Harry to let him know of our plans. We wouldn't want him getting worried about us. Wahoo's going to be so... How do we get up there? So once we reached the bridge, our next problem was figuring out how to get up onto it so we could cross the Danube. It turned out to be quite complicated, with rivers joining rivers and bridges going under other bridges and bike paths looping around and not really knowing where they were going to go, but we figured it out. In fact, what we actually did was just start following a couple of locals, hoping they were going the same way that we were going, with absolutely no evidence. I want one of those. So the far side of the Danube was not as picturesque, but it does have a bike path, even though it's alongside a busy road, so at least we were safe. And here's another view of the landslide we had to get around. Do you remember how I said I could count the idiot cyclists on this route on the fingers of one hand? Well, this guy in black was the forefinger and thumb on that hand. Day 13. Here's my room. Here's the tiny little door. So that evening we were in a hotel complex that seemed to be half the size of the town it was in. It really was quite lovely, with ancient rooms beautifully refurbished, so I decided I'd give you a quick tour of my room. It's quite lovely. I have no complaints about the accommodation on this trip. Very nice. It's got a fan so I can do laundry. There's the shower. That's about it. Bye. It's the last day today. We're going to Vienna. It's hard to believe. You know, at first all this felt kind of weird. Fully supported riding, staying in hotels overnight, getting our bags delivered. But after a few days it felt very natural, and now I'm going to have to fly home tomorrow and go back to work. That feels weird.
I see I see recognizable faces, so I must be somewhere important.
Yes. Thank you.
The final few miles into Vienna, we all grouped up. So let's take a moment to consider the pros and cons of riding something like this unsupported or supported with a company such as Peak Tours. For sure it's cheaper to ride this unsupported, and you get to ride whenever you want, wherever you want. I've done a lot of unsupported bike touring in America. Generally I've not had any issues, but on the other hand, that's because in America, most of the hotels are parts of chains. I know what I'm going to get with the Best Western. I know what I'm going to get with the Motel 6. On the other hand, in Europe, there are very few motel chains. Most of the hotels are run by families. They're family run, and you don't know what you're going to get. Peak Tours has spent years perfecting the route, constantly improving it, adjusting it for road closures. They've evaluated probably thousands of hotels and rejected a lot of them because they just weren't up to standards. So yes, supported touring is tamer. There are no nasty surprises. A lot of people like that. So yes, you're paying more, but you're paying not to have nasty surprises. You're paying for someone else to take the risk. Now, my daughter asked me when I got back, which did I prefer? Did I prefer Le Jog or did I prefer Moselle to Mozart? And that's a hard question to answer. Le Jog is definitely harder. Each day is longer, most days have a lot more climbing. But when you say you've done Le Jog, a lot of people know immediately what that means. If you say, I've done Moselle to Mozart, they're going to say, what the heck is that? I did get a greater sense of achievement after riding Le Jog, but if what you want is to ride a reasonable distance every day, not too much climbing, exquisite scenery, then Moselle to Mozart is the one for you.